Hello and welcome everyone to the 9th of September daily news analysis from the Hindu newspaper. पहला आज का जो इम्पोर्टेंट आर्टिकल है, मोदी बाइडेन वेलकम प्रोग्रेस इन डिफेंस टाइज, ईस्टर्न हैज एन overhaul the criminal law bills and the big picture, change the playbook, repatriate Indian children, criminal trial ideally need dynamic judges, says top court. New Delhi declaration almost ready, says India's G20 Sherpa. We have a lot to bring to G20 table, African Union chief, according to African Union chief. Philippines condemns illegal actions by Chinese boat in South China Sea. India's G20 lead effective even if Russia absent. RBI decides to discontinue ICRR in a phased manner. China slows fertilizer exports, raising concern in India. India's forest reserves jump $4.03 billion to $598.89 billion. IOC's Panipat ethanol plant to hit 100% capacity utilization soon. तो पहला जो आर्टिकल है, मोदी बाइडेन वेलकम प्रोग्रेस इन डिफेंस टाइज. Joint statement highlights deals on jet engine, armed drones and WTO dispute settlement. PM says India-US friendship will continue to play a great role in furthering global good. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Joe Biden on Friday welcomed the completion of the notification process in the US Congress on August 29 for a commercial agreement between General Centric Aerospace and Hindustan Aeronautics Limited (HAL) to manufacture GEF 414 jet engine in India and the commencement of the negotiations. The leaders lauded the settlement of the seventh and the last outstanding World Trade Organization (WTO) dispute between the two countries. Mr. Biden arrived in New Delhi in the evening to attend the G20 summit and went straight to Prime Minister Narendra Modi's official residence for the bilateral meeting. The summit will be held on Saturday and Sunday. A joint statement issued after the bilateral talks said President Biden welcomed the issuance of a letter of request from the Ministry of Defense of India to procure 31 General Atomics MQ-9B, 16 Sky Guardian and 15 Sea Guardian remotely piloted aircraft and their associated equipment, which will enhance the intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance capability of India's armed forces across all domains. Productive meeting. Happy to have welcomed US President Joe Biden to 7 Lok Kalyan Marg. Our meeting was very productive. We were able to discuss numerous topics which will further economic and people-to-people linkages between India and USA. The friendship between our nations will continue to play a great role in furthering global good, Mr. Modi said on the social media platform X. Mr. Biden lauded India's G20 presidency for demonstrating how the G20 as a forum is delivering important outcomes, the joint statement noted. The leaders reaffirmed their commitment to the G20 and expressed confidence that the outcomes of the G20 Leaders Summit will advance the shared goals of accelerating sustainable development, bolstering multilateral cooperation, and building global consensus around inclusive economic policies, including fundamentally reshaping and scaling up multilateral development banks following Larsen and Toubro L&T, which has concluded a second mastership repair agreement with the U.S. Navy to repair its warship and has so far undertaken three such repairs. Mazagon Dock Shipbuilder Limited, Mumbai has concluded a similar agreement in August 2023. Both sides recommitted to advancing India's emergence as a hub for the maintenance and repair of forward deployed US Navy assets and other aircraft and vessels. The joint statement said the leaders also welcomed further commitments from US industry to invest more in India's maintenance, repair, and overhaul capabilities and facilities for aircraft, it is said. On space cooperation, the leaders welcomed efforts towards establishment of a working group for commercial space collaboration under the existing India-US Civil Space Joint Working Group. The Indian Space Research Organization and the National Aeronautics and Space Administration (NASA) have commenced discussion on the modalities, capacity building, and training for mounting a joint effort to the International Space Station in 2024 and are continuing efforts to finalize a strategic framework for human space flight cooperation by the end of 2023. The statement said Mr. Biden arrived in New Delhi in the eventing in his maiden visit to India as president, as Mr. Biden disembarked from Air Force One, General V.K. Singh, retired General V.K. Singh, the Ministry of State for Road Transport and Highways and the Civil Aviation received received him. This was followed by a small cultural performance. Earlier interacting with the accompanying US media team aboard Air Force One, US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, responding to questions on press access, said this meeting will be taking place at the Prime Minister's residence, so it is unusual in that respect. This is not your typical bilateral visit to India with meetings taking place in the Prime Minister's office. This is the host of the G20 hosting a significant number of leaders doing so in his home, and he has set out the protocols. Mr. Biden is expected to visit India again in January, and as reported by The Hindu earlier, efforts are on by India to have the three leaders of the Quad grouping comprising Australia, Japan, the US, and India as chief guest for the Republic Day parade on January 26. Discussions are underway on it. Officials said if it does not work out, plan is to invite Mr. Biden alone for the parade. In June this year, in an unprecedented development, the two countries settled six of the outstanding bilateral trade dispute in the WTO. Mr. Biden has been keen to see India join the Indo-Pacific Economic Forum's trade pillar launched in May 2022, which India has so far stayed away from, as reported earlier on high technology cooperation. The statement said the US and India intended to undertake a mid-term review of the initiative on critical and emerging technology in September 2023 to continue to drive momentum toward the next annual ICET review co-led by the National Security Advisor of both countries in early 2024, the statement added. Then next जो editorial का portion है, Eastern has India needs to build closer ties with ASEAN for economic strategic reasons. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's whistle-stop summit sojourn to the Indonesian capital of Jakarta earlier this week was primarily aimed at deepening India's engagement with the economically significant grouping of 10 Southeast Asian nations, coming on the eve of India's hosting of the G20 summit in New Delhi. As the current as the current holder of the bloc presidency, Mr. Modi presence at the annual ASEAN Indian Summit was an opportunity to cement traditional ties with the neighboring Asian economies at a time of highlight and global trade uncertainty, as the trade facilitation body UNCTAD noted in its June 21 global trade update. The outlook for global trade in the second half of 2023 is pessimistic, as negative factor including downgraded world economic forecast, persistent inflation, financial vulnerability, and geopolitical tension dominate. Against this backdrop, the joint leaders' statement on the strengthening food security and nutrition in response to crisis at the Asian Indian Summit underscores the shared vulnerability the region perceives in the face of the ongoing highlight and global food security, which has been exacerbated by the war in Ukraine, climate change, and national policy responses to inflationary pressures. India's recent curb on export of rice have triggered some alarm, with the prices of the regional space reportedly nearing a 15-year high. The onset of an El Nino, which is a high which is historically associated with disruptive weather events, creates the ground further, and Asian leaders are justifiable worry. Mr. Modi Mr. Modi's speech laying stress on the need for the rules-based post-COVID-19 world order and a free and open Indo-Pacific was clearly directed as members among the ASEAN bloc who are increasingly disquieted by China's recent muscle flexing and claiming over the South China Sea. The Prime Minister's not subheld message to the ASEAN members is that India is a more reliable long-term strategic and economic partner which has no territorial ambitions that could discomfit them. India also sought to position itself as a voice to amplify the concerns of the global south, stressing that it would be mutually beneficial for India, grappling as it is with an underwhelming free trade agreement with 10 nations grouping, trade ties with the eastern economies have grown in volume but asymmetrically, with imports far outpacing the country's export. The widening trade deficit and the perceptions that Chinese goods are taking advantage of lower traffic tariffs under the FTA to find their way into the Indian market have, among other factors, precipitated a review of a pact that is likely to be completed in 2025. In the meantime, India needs to stay closely engaged with the ASEAN members both as a trade hedge against the slowdown in its main Western market and to highlight its significance as an all-weather ally. And overall, the criminal law builds in the big picture. The central government introduced three bills in parliament in August called Bharatiya Nyaya Sanghita Bill, न्याय संहिता 2023, भारतीय नागरिक सुरक्षा संहिता BNSS 2023, and भारतीय साक्ष्य बिल 2023. They are to replace the existing Indian Penal Code 1860, the Code of Criminal Procedure CRPC 1973, and the Indian Evidence Act 1872, respectively. Though some amendments have been made and gaps filled through judicial pronouncement, sorry, The status have stood the test of time. It is worth examining how the proposed changes will impact law enforcement agencies. The Bharatiya Nagarika Suraksha Samhita. There is an explicit provision in the BNSS on the registration of a cognizable offence in any police station, irrespective of the area where the offence is committed, though this practice, known as a recording first information report or FIR at zero, has been in use for many years now. Its formal inclusion in the BNSS may help complain, complainants gets their cases registered as a matter of right without running around. A provision has been added to permit the conduct of a preliminary inquiry to ascertain the existence of prima facie case even if the information discloses commissions of a cognizable offence punishable with more than 3 years but less than 7 years of imprisonment. This is a variance with the ratio of the Supreme Court judgment in Lalita Kumari versus Government of Uttar Pradesh 2013, where it was held that the police have no options but to register an FIR if the information discloses commissions of a cognizable offence. Though certain categories were carved out to conduct a preliminary inquiry, this was only to ascertain commissions of a cognizable offence and not check their truthfulness. As there does not seem to be an intelligent differentia vis-a-vis the rest of the cognizable cases with the overall objective of the persons, this differentiation may not stand scrutiny in constitutional court. Nevertheless, this clause has advantages and disadvantages. The parties at dispute may arrive at a compromise in the given limit of 14 days to conduct a preliminary inquiry, or cases may not turn out to be true prima facie to proceed further. On the other hand, the police may misuse this period to and avoid registering even true cases. All provisions of the CRPC on arrest have been retained in the BNSS. It would have been appropriate to include the ratio of the Supreme Court judgment in Ernest Kumar versus State of Bihar 2014 to justify an arrest by making it mandatory for the police officer to mention reasons of arrest, support with justifiable material for the judicial magistrate to record satisfaction and make it a formal part of the BNSS. A new clause says that for offence punishable with less than 3 years of imprisonment, an arrest could be done only with the prior permission of a deputy superintendent of police if the accused person is infirm or is aged over 60. This may provide some relief to these two categories of person provided Deputy Superintendent of Police uses the clause judicially. The new code provides for handcuffing in at least a dozen categories of persons who were accused of serious offences inter alia, such as one who commits a terrorist act, murder, rape, acid attacks, or offence against the state. This is sure to help police who may be short-staffed to secure their custody, but the enabling section that guides handcuffing has not changed. It says that the person arrested shall not be subjected to more restraint than is necessary to prevent his escape. Possibility of escape or physical attack when such criminals are produced before court, since the constitutional provision and enabling provision of the law remain unaltered, the Supreme Court's guidelines on handcuffing will still prevail. At the scene of crime. The new Sanghita provides for a mandatory visit of crime scene by a forensic expert and the collection of forensic evidence for offences punishable with more than 7 years of imprisonment. But on realization of the ground reality of limited forensic infrastructure at field level, a maximum 5 years of leverage has been given to state government to bring this clause into operation. Therefore, unless a state government commit themselves to the provision of sufficient resources for the development of forensic infrastructure, technology, and manpower, the impact of this change may not be visible soon. The Samhita rightly encourages the use of audio-video means in recording the various steps of investigations. This includes searches. However, the preferred use of smartphones as recommended has its limitations. The Supreme Court in Safi Muhammad versus the State of Himachal Pradesh 2018 directed the Ministry of Home Affairs and States to develop facilities for the videography and photography of crime scene during investigation at the level of a police station. A pilot project is in progress and this needs to be taken forward to ensure that the provisions of a new code are implemented in their true spirit. Despite a ban on the two-finger test in a case of rape, and these tests have been termed by the Supreme Court to be unscientific and violative of the dignity and privacy of rape victim survivor in Lilu at Rajeshwar and ANR versus State of Haryana 2013. The ban does not have a place in the code since the Union Ministry of Health and Family Welfare had also issued similar instructions with the guidelines for the medical examination. This was a good opportunity for the central government to have ensured compliance of its own instruction in a legal way on the disclosure of identity of a victim survivor of rape, the provision of giving authorization to disclose identity to the next of kin in the case victim is minor may also be omitted as the protection of children from sexual offense act which exclusively deals with the issue and does not have a similar provision. The Supreme Court in Nippon Saxena versus Union of India 2018 also expressed a reservation as the next of kin may not be appropriate party to delegate such authority. Duration of policy of custody. A provision in the Sanghita that has raised the eyebrows of critics increase in the period of a police custody exceeding 15 days are provided in CRPC. This may help the police to interrogate an accused person again if additional evidence is found during an investigation. However, there are two caveats to this provision. First, there must be adequate grounds to permit an extension. Second, the 15-day limit can be exceeded only after the initial 40 days or 60 days out of a total detention of 60 days or 90 days depending on whether an offense is punishable with imprisonment of up to 10 years or more. The accused will still be eligible to be released on default bail after a total detention of 60 days or 90 days as provided in the CRPC. Thus, the discretion to permit additional police custody reset which with the judiciary. The Samhita also proposes enlarging the scope of judicial inquiry into suspicious deaths by including dowry deaths, but relaxes the provision of the mandatory recordings of statement of a woman, a male under the age of 15 or above 65 years in CRPC at the place of their residence based on their willingness. It is hoped that this provision is not misused by the police, especially in crimes against women and children. A standing order that could have been included in the Sanghita with respect to inquest is the videography and photography of a postmortem, particularly in case where it is a custodial death or is a death caused in an exchange of fire with the police or other authorities. The Supreme Court and the National Human Rights Commission of the India has repeatedly asked states to comply with such instruction. Another objections of the court to make a spot sketch of the scene of crime drawn on scale by a draftsman in order to make it admissible in court could also be included in the Sanghita to improve the quality of the investigation. Overall, some of the proposed changes are definitely progressive in nature but cannot be termed as path-breaking or radical. What must not be forgotten is that police stations are generally understaffed, have poor mobility, insufficient training infrastructure, and poor housing facilities. Police personnel work under the stressful conditions. Therefore, the colonial mindset will go only if police reformation is taken up in its entirely and not just tweaking some provisions of the applicable laws. Indian Penal Code IPC 1860 to be replaced by Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita Bill 2023. It will have 356 sections instead of 511 sections in IPC. 175 sections have been amended, 8 sections have been added, and 22 sections have been repealed. Then the Code of Criminal Procedure CRPC 1973 to be replaced Bharatiya Nagarika Suraksha Samhita 2023. It will have 533 sections instead of 478 sections in CRPC. 160 sections have been changed, 9 sections have been added, and 9 sections have been repealed. Then last, the Indian Evidence Act 1872 to be replaced by Bharatiya Sakya Bill 2023. It will have 170 sections instead of 167 sections in IEA. 23 sections have been changed, one section has been added, and 5 sections have been repealed. According to Amit Shah, from 1860 to 2023, the country's criminal justice system functioned as per the laws made by the British. I can assure the House that this bill will transform our criminal justice system. The aim will not be to punish it, it will be to provide justice. And next important editorial का जो section है, change the playbook, repatriate Indian children. Priyadarsan Patil, Dhara Saha, and Sagarika Chakravarti are among several expatriate Indian mothers who have been were separated from their children by their host states in a gross violation of human rights that affect the well-being of the mothers, their children, and their families. After her children were confiscated by Australian Child Services authorities and the families pleased to have the children repatriated to India fell on deaf ears as a distraught Patel a mother of two working in IT industry. In the IT industry was driven to despair. She ended her life. According to news reports, the Australian Child Protection Authorities had been called in by doctors in Australia against whom the mother had filed a complaint of mistreatment when her elder child was admitted in a hospital for the treatment in Germany. Saha, along with her software engineer husband, have been separated from their baby girl, now 22.5-year-old, who was sent to permanent foster care by Germany's Child Welfare Agency in 2021 after the parents were accused of having injured the child. Despite evidence to the contrary, supported by expert medical reports, neither the parents nor the doctors accusing them of injury were cross examined. The police investigation was also closed without charges over a year ago, and the court's own appointed psychological experts recommended that the child be placed under supervision at a parent and child center, but the court ignored all this. In its decision, the Indian government has intervened, asking for the baby's return to India child protection authorities, but Germany is yet to relent a similar playbook. These cases across different jurisdictions have increased in frequency over the years and follow a similar playbook. A young family moves to work in high income country. The parents are accused of abusing their children either by the school where the child is struggling to adjust to foreign ways or a hospital when they take their injured or sick child for treatment. They are subjected to a trial that is very one-sided with assessment by social workers who are culturally prejudiced. Parent custody is terminated. The child and its siblings are then placed in foster care for the entirety of their childhood. Contact with parents is either completely barred or limited to 1 hour every few weeks in a dingy contact center. Very soon, the child is completely alienated from its parents. Typically, these children are placed with local foster carriers without a ethnic or cultural links with the child's origin. Consequently, these children lose their identity and are unable to develop any bonds with their country of origin of their extended families. They emerge from foster care doubly alienated. They are not citizens of a country of residence and also have no substantial ties with their country of origin. With some exceptions, the family, including the children and Indian children, in ordinary circumstances, when removed from parental custody, children are entitled to care from extended family. But since there are none in the country of residence, these children do not have that option. That is precisely where the playbook needs to change. A return is more human. A return to safe placement in the human home country is inarguably a more human and compassionate solution for such children instead of leaving them in the custody of a foreign state. Sagarika Chakraborty, who inspired the characterization in the film Mrs. Chatterjee versus Norway, a case of a Bengali filmy family whose children were taken away in Norway and repatriated after strong interventions by India managed to raise her children well since their return. There are many other examples of children repatriated under similar circumstances who have grown up happy and well adjusted. Him in India, foreign nations should set their sanctimonious views and engage in a sincere inquiry of parents claims of cultural prejudice and unfair trials in their children protection system. Moreover, regardless of parental behavior, the fate of these children must be considered on broader grounds than on a mere technical consideration of the place of residence. Persisting with a moralizing stance while ignoring cultural sensitivities and separating children from their even extended families is an abuse of child's rights in itself. Decision makers and government must, in each case, determine the benefits of returning such children to their home country where they can live with extended family and grow up in familiar cultures. Criminal trials ideally need dynamic judges, says top court. The Supreme Court has said that the criminal trials ideally need active and dynamic judges rather than reticent or tac- taciturn ones. Reticent may be good in many circumstances, but a judge remaining mute during trial is not an ideal situation. A taciturn judge may be the model caricatured in public mind, but there is nothing wrong in his becoming active or dynamic during trial, so that criminal justice being the end could be achieved. A bench of Justice B.R. Gabhai, J.B. Pardikses, Pardiwala and P.K. Mishra highlighted the judgment concerned an appeal by a man facing the death penalty for the rape and murder of a 10-year-old. Justice Pardiwala said the case was riddled with inconsistencies that neither the public prosecutor nor the trial judge had cared to point out. In one instance, the contradictions concerned who had actually lured the victim out of their house. The Supreme Court said the court's silence regarding these disparities, even when the case came up in appeal before the Patna High Court, was shocking. The case has been returned to the High Court for a fresh look. If a criminal court is to be an effective instrument in dispensing justice, the presiding judge must cease to be a spectator and a mere recording machine. He must become a participant in the trial by evincing intelligent active interest by putting questions to witness in order to ascertain the truth. Justice Pardiwala observed Section 165 of the Evidence Act confers vast and unrestricted powers on the trial court to put any question he pleases in any form and at any time of any witness or of the parties about any fact relevant or irrelevant in order to discover fact. Then New Delhi Declaration almost ready, says G20, India's G20 Sherpa. Paragraph of Ukraine remains a sticking point, draft to be handed to leaders for discussion at summit as officials downplay issues with China. Xi's absence. They indicate there has been a considerable movement on all the non-geopolitical issues. The joint declaration is almost ready, said India's G20 Sherpa Amitabh Kant, in indicating that the Sherpas or leaders representative for G20 countries will now hand over the document to the G20 leaders who began their summit on Saturday in an effort to close the gaps, mainly over the paragraph on Ukraine. Mr. Kant also downplayed issues with China during negotiations and said that while all countries have a veto power over the joint statement to be issued, India had been able to bring every single country on board with its priorities. Our New Delhi declarations is almost ready, Mr. Khan said at a briefing on Friday ahead of the G20 summit. The New Delhi leaders' declaration, which you will see after the summit, will have the voice of the global south and developing countries. No document in the world would have such a strong voice for the developing countries, he added. Speaking about the finance track, Economic Affairs Secretary Ajay Seth, who is also the co-chair of the finance track of negotiations, said the delegates had a particularly rich and intense discussion on reform of multilateral development banks, including the International Monetary Fund, and India was highly hopeful that discourse over the past 9 months will get a positive consideration from the leaders. As Sherpa negotiations continued on Friday and were expected to go late into the night, diplomats and officials privy to the talks indicated there had been a considerable movement on all the non-geopolitical issues, indicating consensus on the language on climate action, finance, phasing out fossil fuel, and debt restructuring. The final push will now need to come from Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the other G20 leaders as they discuss the joint declaration and other issues. during two sessions on Saturday, where the membership of the African Union is expected to be cleared. The leaders will meet again on Sunday for one session, after which the declaration, if it is agreed upon, will be released. If not only a chairman's summary and outcome document listing the areas of disagreement and agreement will be put out, which will be a precedent in G20's history, which has always managed to issue a joint document firm on Ukraine. Meanwhile, Western leaders landing in Delhi on Friday said they would hold firm on reference to Ukraine despite Russia's objection. We hope that it will be possible to have a communique, and there is no secret about the position that the European Union is defending around the table regarding the war launched by Russia against Ukraine, said European Council President Charles Michel at a press conference in Delhi. While China has opposed the insertion of the Bali paragraph from last year's G20 summit, objecting to any geopolitical issues in the G20 statement, Russia has opposed direct criticism of its invasion of Ukraine last year, adding that the impact of sanctions by the Western countries and arms transfer to Ukraine should be added if the reference remained. We cannot fall back from what was agreed to in Bali. A senior Japanese government official told the Hindu the price hike is in energy and good has been triggered by Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which is a blatant violation of international law. It is obviously because of aggression by Russia against Ukraine that the issue of food security has become more important than even before. We understand the G20 is about economic issues, but we cannot discuss economic issues without addressing that root cause. Default negotiator asked if China had blocked the joint statement and whether Chinese President absence from the summit was a spoiler. The official present in the including Foreign Secretary Binoy Quatra, Mr. Ajay Seth, and sorry, Mr. Ajay Seth and G20 chief coordinator Harshvardhan Singla avoided any criticism of Beijing, suggesting they were still hopeful of successful negotiations. China is a multilateral player where the issues are very different from bilateral issues. Chinese discuss issues of growth and development from their perceptive perspective. We have been able to work with every single country and bring them on board, Mr. Kant replied. China has, however, been among the more difficult negotiators in the talks, according to people familiar with the discussion on a number of issues beyond Ukraine, and at one point even raised objection to a routine mention in the joint declaration referring to the US hosting the G20 in 2026 following Brazil in 2024 and South Africa in 2025. In Beijing, the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs said that on the issues of Ukraine, China had participated in the G20 summit document in an active and constructive way. We stand ready to work with the other parties towards positive outcomes at the New Delhi summit under the principle of consensus building, said Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson Mao Ning, who also indicated that the Chinese position on climate change stood with developing countries. Then next we have a lot to bring to the G20 table. African Union chief. The African Union is confident of becoming a full member of G20 during the Delhi summit beginning here on Saturday, says its chairperson Agile Asomani. In an exclusive interview with The Hindu, Mr. Asomani, who is also the president of Comoros, said member countries of the G20 should invest in the industrialization of Africa, assuring the members that Africa is willing to do what it takes to deal with the immigration issue being faced by the European countries. He urged the G20 economies to utilize African resources to manufacture products in Africa. Since I become the chair of the African Union, we have held several rounds of conversation with the G20 members to make African Union a member of G20, and we have seen a lot of support from them for our membership. We are hopeful that we will become a G20 member tomorrow, Saturday. We are hopeful that we can work together and we have a lot to bring to the table of G20, Mr. Asamani said. World has to step in. He pointed out that Africa is facing problems such as a drought and conflict, but to find a lasting solution, the economic issues of Africa have to be dealt with. Our main priority is to achieve industrialization. We have a lot of resources in Africa, but unfortunately, we do not process them in the continent, and that is why it is important for us to work with the organization like G20 so that they can invest in Africa and process and procure and produce goods in Africa. Africa's problem can be solved by the African countries, but the world also has to step in with the investment and supplies to ensure that the goals are met. He added, we have drought and flood in Africa that lead to famines, but if we can manufacture in Africa, then we can deal with the famines very easily. For that, we have to talk to our partners because in the coming 2 decades, Africa will be a very big market, said President Assamani, the topmost official of African Union, also said that Africa must find a solution to the immigration crisis that is a major issue for Europe. It is the duty of Africa to ensure job security in the continent so that our youth will remain on our continent and find the jobs that they require. But we also have to work hand in hand with Europe, and Europe will have to help us train our people in Comoros. It is our priority to train young people so that they can find employment when they go abroad, he said. War storage war and shortage. He also said that African Union has been discussing ways to deal with the fallout of the Ukraine war, which has hit supplies of agriculture products and fertilizer to Africa, calling for an end to the violence. He said, "What is happening in Ukraine is a violence of the United Nations Chartered. There is insecurity all over the world, and this war is not setting a good example. The war in Ukraine has food and security consequences for us. We have been we have been to Kiev and Russia and met with President Zelensky and President Putin, but unfortunately the conflict is still raging. We have authorized the foreign ministers of South Africa and Russia to report to us the position of the conflict, and hopefully we will resume our negotiations soon, he said. Rice export ban, flagging the recent ban on export of rice imported by India. He said the food situation in Africa requires India to step in by ensuring supplies. As there is a crisis-like situation in multiple African countries, we are planning to talk to Indian authorities as we depend on Indian rice. India has a lot to provide to Africa, like capacity building. Africa needs partners who understand us, and India is one such country, Mr. Asamani said. Then next जो है Philippines condemn illegal actions by Chinese boat in South China Sea. The Philippines condemned illegal actions by Chinese vessels on Friday after the boats allegedly interfered in another resupply missions to remote military outposts in disputed South China Sea. Two Philippines Coast Guard vessels were escorting supply boat through Second Thomas Shoal in the Spratly Islands when they encountered four Chinese Coast Guard and four militia boats. Aggressive conduct. While the cargo was successfully delivered to the handful of Filipino troops on a grounded Navy ship, the Chinese vessels had carried out harassment, dangerous maneuvers, and aggressive conduct towards the Philippine boat. The National Task Force said the task force strongly deplores and condemns the continued illegal, aggressive, and destabilizing conduct of the CCG and CMM within our nation's EZ. The task force said using the acronyms for Chinese vessels and the Philippines exclusive economic zone. China claims also almost the entire waterway through which trillions of dollars in trade passes annually and has ignored an international ruling that its assertion has no legal basis. In a statement, the China Coast Guard accused the Philippine boats of entering the water around the reef without obtaining permissions. Second, Thomas Shoal is about 200 kilometers from the western Philippines island of Palawan and more than 1000 kilometers from China's nearest major landmass, Hainan Island. Friday's resupply missions happened on the same day Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos signed a strategic partnership agreement with Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese in Manila. The next India's G20 led effective even if Russia absent. Russia's war on Ukraine, which has escalated food and energy prices, is the most important threat to global growth. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said on September 8, stressing that the G20 remains an effective forum to address global challenges even without Russia's active participation. A reference to Vladimir Putin's decision to skip the bloc's New Delhi summit. The Treasury Secretary said India's G20 leadership has had proven effective on several fronts, including the reforms of multilateral development banks and in addressing the debt concerns of vulnerable countries. We see G20 as a premier organization that is taking on critical challenges facing the global economy. Mrs. Yellen remarked the G20, in spite of obvious problems due to Russia's war against Ukraine and Russia's general absence from G20 initiative, has been extremely effective, especially under India's leadership. She added on the prospects of the G20 summit in New Delhi, yielding a communique. Mrs. Yellen noted it is challenging to craft such language, but negotiators are working hard to do so. She exuded confidence about being able to provide supplementary funds to help Ukraine, reiterating that the most important thing we could do for global growth is for Russia to end its brutal war on Ukraine. Mrs. Yellen, however, expressed surprise at the strength and resilience of the global economy, bolstering MDBs. Mrs. Yellen also signaled that the US is taking the lead on bolstering MDBs, lending capacity and leaving it to the other countries to do what they can. An expert group set up by the Indian presidency has recommended reforms of the MDBs that could scale up their funding. However, the G20 members have expressed reluctance about the plan as they are unsure about how much they may have to contribute. US President Joe Biden has initiated a move to provide a $2.25 billion of funding for the World Bank and a $25 billion loan to the IMF that would help provide concessional finance to low-income countries. Mrs. Yellen pointed out she downplayed concerns that Russia had managed to work around the price cap imposed on its oil export. My perception is the price cap continue to work. Our estimate is that Russia's revenue from oil has declined by around 44% over the last year, and Russia's export into the global market have continued. Responding to a query on the Chinese economy, Mrs. Yellen said, "We see China's growth as slowing over time. That said, China has quite a bit of policy space to address these challenges." The next day, RBI decides to discontinue ICRR in a phased manner. The Reserve Bank of India (RBI) has decided to continue the incremental cash reserve ratio (ICRR) in a phased manner. The measure was intended to absorb surplus liquidity generated by various factors, including the return of 2000 notes to the banking system based on an assessment of current and evolving liquidity condition. It has been decided that the amount impounded under the ICRR would be released in stages so that system liquidity is not subjected to sudden shocks and money markets function in an orderly manner. The RBI said while 25% of the ICRR maintained would be released on September 9, another 25% would be released on September 23, and the balance would be released on October 7. The RBI had announced last month that scheduled banks must maintain an ICRR of 10% on the increase in their net demand and time liabilities between May 19 and July 28. China slows fertilizer export, raising concern in India. And around half a million metric tons of urea are held up at China. Around half a million metric tons of urea are held up at Chinese port after the country curbed exports following a price surge, an analyst and Indian company official said. CNAMPGC Holding Limited, one of the China's top fertilizer exporters, said it would proactively decrease exports and make every effort to ensure domestic supply and price stability. According to a notice dated September 2 on its website, state-owned China National Offshore Oil Company (CNOOC) has also urged its subsidiaries to prioritize urea supply to the domestic market ahead of the autumn slowing season. According to a September 4 notice seen by Reuters, these curbs have triggered fears of a rise in global price in spending by Indian companies as India imports about 30% of urea needed annually, and China was its second largest supplier last year. Then India's forex reserve jumped 4.03 billion to $598.89 billion. India's forex reserves jumped by 4.039 billion to $598.897 billion for the week ended September 1, the Reserve Bank said. In the previous reporting week, the overall reserve has dropped by $30 million to 594.858 billion. Foreign currency assets rose by $3.442 billion to $530.691 billion according to RBI's weekly statistics. Supply gold reserves rose $584 million to $44.939 billion. Special drawing rights climbed by $1 million to $18.195 billion. India's reserve position with the IMF rose $12 million to $5.073 billion, RBI data showed. Then next जो है IOC's Panipat ethanol plant to hit 100% capacity utilization soon. Indian Oil Corporation's 900 crore 2G ethanol plant that was inaugurated by Prime Minister Narendra Modi in August 2022 is set to reach 100% capacity utilization in a few months from 30% now. IOC's chairman and managing director Srikant Madhav Vaidya said on Friday in an interaction with journalists of the Hindu group of publication. Mr. Vaidya said that the feedstock for the bioethanol plant, rice husk Pirelli, was available for collection only for about 45 days and would need to be stored for the entire year. The plant would need 150,000 tons of feedstock every year. The collection of the rice husk had begun and the plant would reach full capacity shortly, he added. Refiners, including IOC, are required to supply petrol that has 20% bioethanol by 2025. Mr. Vaidya said that in October, IOC's blend would reach 12.5%, which would be raised to 15% next year and then gradually to 20% by 2025. Also, part of the 2G ethanol would go to the production of SAF, Sustainable Aviation Fuel, which is also coming up near the Panipat refinery under a joint venture with LanzaJet, a unit of LanzaTech in which IOC has a stake. The carbon offsetting the reduction scheme of International Aviation has said aviation fuel would need to incorporate 2% SAF blends. IOC would be supplying fuels that comply with that decision, Mr. Vaidya added. So this is all for today and we will continue from today tomorrow onwards. So thank you all.